But what we want to talk about this week and what we've been trying to do for these weeks that we've been outside, we've been doing it like this, is we're trying to just go over some basic fundamental parts of the Christian religion. And tonight, what we're going to talk about is forgiveness. Say forgiveness. Forgiveness is a really, really, really important word in the Christian faith. In fact, almost the entirety of the Christian faith centers on this word forgiveness and this reality of what forgiveness actually is. And, in my house, I've told you guys before, I got 5 little kids. My oldest son is 8 years old. So I have from 8 years old all the way down to 10 months, okay? So I have 5 kids in between there. And how many, if you have brothers and sisters, you know that you have had ample opportunities to either forgive or not forgive, right? Because when you live in a house, it's easy to get your toes stepped on by your brothers and sisters, okay? Little brothers, big brothers, little sisters, big sisters. We just got back. The reason I wasn't here 2 weeks ago and I wasn't here last week is because we went on a vacation where we borrowed an RV and we drove up to Northern California. So there's 7 of us in this little tiny RV that's meant to sleep 4, okay? And so, but my kids are used to it because we live in our house is small, and you just can't go anywhere without bumping into somebody or borrowing somebody's thing or taking the last, popsicle or whatever it is, right? And so we had to develop a way to deal with problems, a way to deal with offenses. Guys, listen. So, gentlemen, hey, you're right there in the front row, bro. Rule number 2, do you remember it? What is it? What? Yeah, I respect the leaders. That's me, I'm talking, so give me your respect. All right. So in our house, the rule is if you wrong somebody, you have to ask their forgiveness, okay? And you have to do it sincerely. You have to say, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And if you're the person who's been wronged, you have to say, I forgive you, sincerely. And if I'm not convinced that it's sincere, then you guys need to hug each other or hold hands for a while or something, right? Just to really make sure that the forgiveness is real. It's got to go deep. And so that's the rule in our house. And forgiveness covers little things all the way up to big things. And some of you guys in your life, every day we have little things, but sometimes you have big things that you have to forgive. And I was reminded today as I was thinking about forgiveness and I was thinking about this story that has always stuck with me. And I looked it up and I found out that actually today is the 16th anniversary of this tragic event in our country. 16 years ago today, October 2nd, 2006, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. If you guys are possibly, I don't know if 8th grade trips are canceled for the rest of forever, but if you ever go on your 8th grade trip, there's a good chance you're going to go through Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because Lancaster, Pennsylvania is country, but it's famous for something. Anybody know what it's famous for? Do you? No? It's famous for the Amish. The Amish, there's a huge Amish community that lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. How many of you guys know who the Amish are? The Amish are the guys that oftentimes are wearing black and they don't drive cars. They'll ride like a horse and buggy still today. And the Amish is a Christian group, okay? So they are really faithful, Jesus-loving Christians. And they live kind of an extreme life. They don't use, different sects are different, but they don't use, many of them don't use electricity at all, or they don't use like certain things like modern day life. So they're living kind of like how people used to live 150 years ago, like that. But on this day, October 2nd, 2006, something really tragic happened. There's an Amish school, a one-room schoolhouse with a bunch of Amish kids in it, and a man from their neighborhood named Charles Roberts, he drove his truck up, he went into the room, and he brought a gun in. It was one of the earlier school shootings in our country. And this grown man, he dismissed a bunch of people, and he was just left with this group of girls, and he shot 10 girls, killing 5 of them, severely wounding 5 more. And people couldn't believe it, right? I mean, it's the kind of thing that is like the most terrifying thing to see or to hear. Anytime there's a school shooting, the reason it's such big news in our country is because if you have a kid, if you have ever known a kid, if you have ever been a kid, you know that that's one of the most terrible things you could ever do is to shoot up kids at a school, and for a grown person to do that. And so it was just national news. It blew up. It was everywhere. And for the Amish community, who's normally, they live very quiet lives, very peaceful lives, they were thrust into the spotlight, this national spotlight, all this kind of stuff. And then kind of, you know how those things go where they just blow up in a big news story and then the news moves on. But the information started to come out. If you paid attention to the story after all, what happened after that shooting was one of the most remarkable things that I've ever read about or heard about in my life. And for the last 16 years, I've like checked in on this story and like just paid attention to it because it's been really remarkable. The night of the shooting, that shooting happened in the afternoon. That night, the father of one of the girls who had been shot and killed walked over to the man's house. The man, Charles Roberts, he had a wife and 3 small kids. And he walked over his house because he wanted to talk to the family. And so he knocked on the door, but they weren't there. And so he thought maybe she's at her in-laws' house, is about 2 miles away. And so he walked the 2 miles to their house, and he knocked on the door, and sure enough, she was there. And she came out, she answered, and he just said, I just want to tell you, I forgive your husband. We love you, and we don't hold anything against you. One, we know this is your fault, but even your husband, who is his fault, we want to just tell you, we forgive him too. And you know, when you see like the kind of remarkable forgiveness that someone can show in the midst of their incredible pain, and something so bad that happened to him, you think, that's a remarkable individual. But it turns out it's not just him. Because the following week or two, they had funerals for all these girls. And there were huge national events with national news organizations coming and just tons of press and people, and they buried these girls. But you know, the guy, Charles Roberts, his family buried him too. And they obviously in that situation, you're ashamed and you feel terrible. It's not a celebration of life. The context of his death is terrible. And so they had a very quiet funeral. But the news found out about it, and the news showed up. And as they were putting him in the burial site, his immediate family, his parents were there, news organizations. All of a sudden, you saw this group of over 50 Amish people walking out, the parents of those girls who had died and their families, and they began to just surround the family and just be part of the funeral and say, we love you guys. We're glad that you guys are our neighbors. We want you to stay our neighbors. We're going to be here for you guys. And in a situation like that, you know, money, people set up GoFundMe accounts. This is before GoFundMe, but they set up things like that, and people pour in money because people just that are far away, they hear the story, they think, I want to give to that. I want to just try to soften the blow of these people. And so the Amish people started to get checks from people from all over the country, and they actually set up a fund that they shared that money with his family, the man who had killed their kids. And in fact, I was just listening to a testimony today of the man's mom. She had lived in that community and she felt so shameful and terrible. And yet the Amish people came over, and the interview was in this beautiful sunroom that the Amish families had built onto her house. And she said, I've gotten so much healing in this room. And we've celebrated many birthday parties for the Amish kids. And we've had a women's group that meets in here with the Amish women. And it's been such a place of healing in our family. And one of the girls who survived but was incredibly, she was in a wheelchair and a feeding tube, is she reached out to their family. She said, can I come over and can I just like spend time with her? And so every week she would go over to her house and she'd brush her hair and she'd give her a bath if she needed it. And she would read stories to her and sing to her and all this kind of stuff. And you read a story like that and you think, man, out of something so horrific, so terrible, in your deepest pain, how do you immediately offer forgiveness like that? Well, listen, this is really key to the Christian faith. It's something that we have to understand. You have to understand about how God feels about you and then how he expects you to give forgiveness to other people. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So go ahead and break up. You guys go to your normal areas, and your leaders are going to talk to you guys about forgiveness and how forgiveness works. So head there real quick right now.